Here in America, we sure do love our garages. They store our beautiful cars, they're where we turn into weekend warriors, and let's be honest, for many of us, they're also full of boxes of junk and stuff that we're pretty sure we're gonna need someday. But our beloved garages are getting smaller. Now this oddly symmetrical graph here about farmland is actually a major part of the reason why our garages here in America, for the first time in my lifetime at least, are shrinking even while our vehicles are getting bigger and bigger. In fact, 4 of the top 10 best-selling vehicles in America today are full-size pickup trucks like these 19-foot plus long behemoths. Now the whole reason I started digging into this is because of our boy Kevin. That's at Kevin J. Archow 8812 or something like that, who brought this question up in one of my recent videos about why builders don't always finish garage walls. What Kevin asked, and what 1,500 of you also wanted to know, was why our garages are so small that we can't even open a car door without hitting the car next to it. I wanted to know too. Now it looks like garages have started shrinking in the last 5 or so years. So let's set the stage by showing you the dimensions of a 2-car garage over the last several decades. Like you see here, 20 feet, and then 22, then 24, and then sometime in the 90s it kind of standardized around 24 feet, but look what started happening in the 2020s. There's this little caveat here about urban areas. So this feels like it's becoming the norm so far this decade. Smaller and smaller 2-car garages, even in some of the more rural areas, but especially in urban communities. I did try to discover exactly what qualifies as a 2-car garage. At what point does it no longer become a 2-car and maybe is a 1-car garage? But there really are no standards or building codes around this. The American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, doesn't specify a size, but most people and organizations agree that 20 by 20, which is awfully tight honestly, is a minimum standard. Now in many cases, home builders aren't even making 2-car garages this big. In fact, the most conclusive evidence I could find of what even defines a 2-car garage is that it does have to have a 16-foot wide door or 2 individual doors to be considered a 2-car garage. Now, does that mean that a 16 by 16-foot garage is a 2-car garage? Maybe, if you're driving little K-trucks or microvans, I guess. Now I mentioned earlier that the vehicles we drive are getting larger and larger. And I think you'd be pretty shocked to see the difference between the original Ford Explorer, like in Jurassic Park, and what it is today. Today's Explorer is actually 14.5 inches longer than the old Jurassic Park version, and it also grew 8.7 inch wider and then 2 inches taller. But that is nothing compared to the Honda Civic. Today's version of the Civic is 44 inches longer than the original 1973 version, which to me is like absolutely insane. Now the trucks that I mentioned earlier from America's top 10 selling vehicles are typically a little over 19 feet long. These are huge. Now remember that the accepted minimum depth for a 2-car garage is at most 20 feet deep, but many of them are shrinking down to 19 or 18 or even 17 feet, if you can believe that. I think you get the gist though. American cars are getting massive, bigger than ever. Even the land yachts of the 1960s and 70s were not as long as our trucks are today. Since so many of my viewers are from other countries, here's a list of my top 10 viewing countries with the average length of their top 10 best-selling vehicles. But as you can see, America, not surprisingly, has the biggest vehicle averages. But not far behind, you're gonna find Canada, Australia, and Mexico. Brazil, India, and the Philippines have the smallest vehicles, and again, this is just for the viewers that are most likely to watch my channel. In case you were wondering, I probably spent about 2 solid weeks obsessed over all of this and finding all the information, looking up charts, calling people from all over the country, trying to talk to home builders and developers and real estate agents, all this stuff, trying to just understand this so I could present it to you. And I want to give a huge shout out to my buddy Drew Dietrich, who actually helped explain this in a way that made a lot of sense to me, so thank you, Drew, for helping out. On that note, I'm actually also trying to hit my 1 million subscriber mark and get that silly gold play button that I've been after. I'm in my 13th year of making YouTube videos, so if you don't mind throwing me a bone and helping me out, especially if you found this useful, then you can hit that subscribe button down below. Thanks a million. Let's get back to the graph. This graph represents farm ownership over the course of about 110 years, where the number of farm owners went way down while the total farm size per owner went way up. In other words, bigger farms were buying out smaller farms, particularly from about the 1930s through the 70s. The total acreage of farms in America hasn't actually decreased drastically over the years, though it certainly has gone down. According to the United States Department of Agriculture, as of today, roughly half of America's land is used for farming. I don't know if you're surprised to hear that, but it's been sitting around that number for a while. Now, meanwhile, our population in America is steadily growing. During that same time as this land chart, our population has grown from around 76 million to about 300 300 million at the end of this chart, 2007. Now, fast forward to today, the US population is over 335 million people, all with less new residential land available and the biggest vehicles America has ever seen. There's actually one more factor to consider here as well. For most of the last 30 years, landowners have watched as prices have mostly consistently risen year by year. Farmland is oftentimes the most desirable land for real estate opportunities. As you can see by the charts we've looked at, the longer a landowner holds on to that land, the more value it tends to have. That leads us to our final factor, which is the real estate market. Home prices have steadily been rising since the crash of 2008, and in the last few years, since around 2020, they have soared at an astounding rate. We have this massive cliff here during the pandemic that I, for one, absolutely did not see coming, but as a result of the lack of available new land, builders have had to deal with trying to build more homes with less acreage. So let's bring this all together now, our perfect little storm that we've created here. We have less and less land to work with than ever before and fewer farmers to buy it from. We have steadily increasing population and we have soaring demand for homes, including new homes. And to top all that off, we're driving the largest vehicles in America's history. So something's gotta give, and it is giving. If you've got farmland that's close to a developed area, that might be considered a Class A location, like this here. A little further out, you'll find some Class B locations that are relatively close still, but require maybe a bit more travel to stores and restaurants, schools, things like that. Here in the state of Utah, as an example, where I live, the cost for Class A or Class B land is typically around $500,000 per acre, which is crazy by itself. Now, to develop that land, however, you are going to have to spend around half that cost in order to excavate and put in roads and utilities and retention ponds and all the good stuff that goes with that. So you don't just get it and you can start building houses. So now you're looking at a single acre costing a developer somewhere in the neighborhood of $750,000. Now, some of the land within that acre, however, does have to be allotted to other uses besides homes and yards. You have roads for access, maybe a clubhouse, detention basins, sidewalks, city-mandated open spaces, utility parcels, all kinds of stuff. If you're lucky, you're going to get 3 1/4 acre lots out of that single acre lot. Based on our earlier figure of $750K per acre, you now have to sell each lot for around $250,000. So for most builders, they want the price they paid for the land to be somewhere in the 20 to 30% range of their overall retail price that they end up selling the home for. That makes for pretty easy math to find the sweet spot for profitability given construction costs, which also have gone up through COVID and other shortages and issues. So let's average that percentage out, we'll say 25%. That means if $250,000 needs to represent just 25% of the retail price, they need to sell that home for $1 million to come out ahead. That is a pretty expensive house. Remember here that the median home price in America today is $420,000. So we're way above that in that $1 million range. You're going to have a hard time attracting a larger pool of buyers when you're selling homes at more than double the median price. Not only that, but developers tend to have quotas and goals that they're trying to hit annually to sell a certain number of homes per year. That's way harder to do when you're selling $1 million homes on 1/4 acre lots. And to top all that off, we've got our uncommonly high interest rates right now that really are not helping the situation whatsoever. Many builders want to position themselves in that $550,000 price range for single-family homes. That's kind of a sweet spot right now. If you want to sell a house at about $550,000, we need to take about 1/4 of that, and that's what we should be spending on the land. And that equates to $137,500. But remember those acreage prices from before? 1/4 acre being $250K? That means in order to price a home at $550K, they need to divide that 3/4 acre lot into 5.5 lots instead of 3. It's almost twice as many homes per acre. So they're really cramming everything in. So that size of a lot now has to decrease from 1/4 acre to about 0.13 acres, and that makes an absolutely huge difference. You can probably see where we're going with this. So if we now convert that 0.13 acres into square feet, that equates to about 5,662 square feet. Most cities require that a residential lot be about 100 feet deep. We'll talk about why that is. It really has to do with the fact that you need a driveway up front to be around 20 feet deep so that you have enough room to fit a car in front of the driveway without blocking the sidewalk. Plus, you still need to set aside space for a backyard as well, which is normally around 30 feet deep. That means that your 100-foot deep lot now has just 50 feet left to work with as far as depth to build your house on. Next, we've got to calculate the sides. If the yard's 100 feet deep and our lot is 5,662 square feet, that means the lot is 56.62 feet wide. Now each city has different requirements for the setback or the area around the perimeter of the yard that you can't build on. A really common setback is 8 feet per side. So when we add that up, there's 16 feet, and that takes our 56-foot wide lot into a 40-foot wide lot to build a house on. Now just a little side note, this also means that the space between your two houses is only 16 feet, which is really tight. It's not like it used to be. In some areas, the setbacks are actually even smaller, so the houses are even closer. You've probably seen those neighborhoods where it looks like you could actually borrow a cup of sugar by opening your neighbor's window and passing it through type of thing. Super tight, not ideal, but every city has different restrictions, every neighborhood too. Assuming though that you have an 8-foot setback, that means we have a home footprint now of 50 foot deep and 40 foot wide. It's just not a lot to build on. Now almost all the desirable layouts given these limitations use the oh-so-common garage in front, front door in the middle, and an office or front room on the corner type of floor plans. Anything less than that and the home might be less desirable to potential buyers. So the question is, how do you squeeze a front room, an entry, and a garage into a 40-foot wide area? Well, the only way you can. Something's got to give. And usually what that means is that you end up making the garage as small as you can possibly get away with and still call it a 2-car. The front door of a home is usually about 36 inches wide or 3 feet because you likely have to fit everything in your house through that door to move in and out. Now you tack on a little room on the sides for your entry hallway plus your 2 interior walls that go around that, and now our 40-foot layout is down to maybe 35 feet at most. We're shrinking by the second here. We're losing a foot to a foot and a half of our outside walls, so our 35-foot width is now down to less than 34, and we still have to fit a garage and a front room or office in there. Now remember that the front room is the first thing that people see when they walk into a house. So the last thing you want to do is make this tiny little closet-looking space. Builders like to put a good-sized front room in there, but we've only got 34 feet left to work with, so if they put a 10-foot room in there, the house is much less appealing to buyers. So that 24-foot garage is out of the question already. So where do you get that room from? You cut it out of the garage, of course. You put a smaller 22-foot wide garage in there. That way you can still have a 12-foot wide front room. Or, better yet, just make that garage 20 feet and you can use a 14-foot wide front room. Problem solved, right? What's that? Your F-150 is 6'8" wide and your Nissan Rogue is 6 feet wide? No problem, they'll both fit in the garage just fine, so long as you only need to open the doors for one of your cars. And that also assumes that you don't have stairs anywhere in the garage, because then the truck needs to go outside. It won't fit at all. More on that in a second, but everything we just walked through gives us a 40-foot wide building space for the house. Now the sad truth is that so many of the lots being developed today simply aren't that wide. 40 feet would be generous in many cases. There are tons of lots out there that leave the builder with 38 feet, 35 feet. I've seen some that are as low as 30 feet wide. And when you've got 30 feet to work with, there's no way you can put a front room in there, and the entire facade or front of your house is dominated by a garage. Not the most attractive thing you've seen, but sometimes that's what you've got to do. Let's look at the reality of parking in such a small garage. In order for this to make sense, you have to understand how much room is needed to open your vehicle's doors. So most vehicles require about 2.5 feet on either side in order to properly open the door. If there's a space between the cars, ideally you want to leave about 3 feet between them. The other factor here is that in almost every case, a single 2-car garage door is only 16 feet wide, so you have to consider kind of angling the cars into that 16-foot opening. Let's take a look at the Joneses here, who drive an F-150 and a Toyota Camry. The F-150 is about 6'8" wide. Once you add the 5 feet of door opening space required for either side to open the doors, you now need 11'8" to functionally park the truck with anything more than just the driver in the garage. The Camry here is 6 feet wide plus that 5 feet we talked about before, making its requirement 11 feet total. So we add the 11'8" plus the 11 foot, that's 22'8", plus the extra 6 inches in between the cars so the doors don't hit each other, and that puts us at 23 foot and 2 inches. They're just not going to fit. But wait, there's more. Remember that 16-foot wide door? That means that you're not parking at an optimal angle inside the garage. You have to work around that slightly awkward parking angle to avoid scraping both your expensive vehicle and your house. So really, you'll need an extra foot or more for each vehicle. That means we'll likely need a little over 25 feet of width. Now, those stairs we mentioned in the front of the garage, those mean that you need an extra 2 to 4 feet of depth too, so mark that one up to 24 plus feet of depth to fit the 2 vehicles. So that 20 by 20 2-car garage on your brand new house, it's now a 1-car garage. And maybe some storage if you're lucky. But most likely, it's just a dedicated storage unit with a workbench because you need somewhere to keep all your stuff and somewhere else to build some more stuff. If you've got a full-size pickup truck like a huge percentage of Americans do, it's likely parked outside. If you do use your garage for anything but parking, including storage and DIY projects, there's a good chance you have at least one vehicle parked outside. Driveways are becoming parking lots, while garages are becoming storage units. Now, do you park the same amount of vehicles in your garage as it was designed to hold? I'd love to hear about this. Now let us know that in the comments if you don't mind. Also, if you're wondering why so many houses have these weird half-finished garages that look like somebody ran out of money and skipped town, check out this video that gets into exactly why that's so common. I'm Nils with Learn to DIY. Thanks for watching.